Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Big Picture. Big Picture topics, great guests, great conversations. As always, my name is John-Allan Namu, and to my left is in lilac.
Yes.
I learned that color today.
Yes, I did tell him lilac and then he wore dark blue.
No, I know what I did. I ChatGPT'd what goes with lilac, because I'd have nothing in that color in my wardrobe, I promise you.
Ati what goes with it?
Yes, so I was like, see, tuna compliment kiasi.
So, congratulations.
Justine, salimia watu.
Hi everyone, I am Justine. I hope you guys had a really good Easter, and sorry to everyone of the Catholic faith for losing your Baba. Be strong. It's an important moment. Come together and remember that he was a really cool Pope. Yeah.
He was indeed. Pope Francis went to be with the Lord a few hours after meeting with J.D. Vance, but we are not reading too much into it.
It was his fault.
That way.
Yeah.
Sijasema mimi, please. Anyway, rest in peace, Pope Francis. The Holy See obviously is going to be experiencing some changes, and to the Catholic faith around the world, we've been through this before, and there will be white smoke soon. But in studio today, and we're discussing really interesting topics. First off, with that big documentary that we released, Africa Uncensored, finally released after nearly a year of research, coming off of the back of the first series, which dealt with land corruption. We've got co-producer of the series, I should say, our head of investigation, Sam Munia, in studio to discuss Title Deal Season 2, Episode 1, Land and Lawlessness. Sam, salimia watu.
Hi guys. Good to be here.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were just going to stop at hi, guys.
No. It's good to be back here.
Yeah.
And I hope we should be able to have a good discussion in regards to lands and cartels in the country.
Cartels.
Yes.
Yeah. Kuna cartel hapa, lakini we won't discuss. The purple cartel, the lilac cartel.
Not even own property. This is like the highest priced.
Naona digital properties uko nazo mingi. And we've also got, from last week actually, let me ramp this up nicely. Last week, OdipoDev, data insights company we work with quite often, great partners, and they produce fantastic research that's really been at the nexus between leverage and cultural insight. Last week, they produced or released some research that has really been rocking the digital world quite a bit, because their contention, and it's not just contention, but it's backed by fact and evidence and research, is that the podcasters are literally coming. They're coming for the cheese of people in legacy media in terms of influence, in terms of voice, and we've got the cultural research lead here to discuss that with us, Nobert Mburu. Thank you, and first of all, welcome to the Big Picture.
Thank you.
Tunamonanga tu kwa WhatsApp, so it's good to see that he's a person who exists in actual life.
CEO ghostwriter.
CEO ghostwriter. And later he will also be joined by another Mnati, Mwafreeka, he of Iko Nini, that very big podcast, one of the top 20 podcasts in Kenya. The host of that podcast, he's going to be joining us here to also give us his point of view on the same. 1 hour of really great insight and impact in terms of conversations. But let's start with Title Deals. And in case you missed it, this is the trailer for that series produced by Sam Munia, who's in studio with us here, and Joy Kirigia.
It was terrible. It looked like fiction. You know, it is like a movie.
The cartels are more powerful than the justice system. The cartels are well connected.
The deals aren't done. They just got darker.
I'm talking about very senior security officers, but they are the perpetrators. Do you carry documents?
No.
In your pocket?
No, you don't.
Season 2 of Title Deals is back, digging deeper into the power plays, land grabs, and hidden hands, shaping who really owns Kenya.
Rico power! The Rico Viva!
I'm not taking off you, I'm taking off the house.
I keep seeing the faces of the goons, over and over again. Just trying to find that piece has been really difficult.
If title deeds can go missing, what can't go missing?
If you put a thief in charge of a country, thievery becomes everybody's favorite pastime. Kila mtu atakuwa mwizi.
Episode 1, Season 2 of Title Deals, already live on our YouTube page and doing quite well. We're just about around 40,000 views now, and it's really worth the watch. I'm saying this despite knowing, all of the content from before it was produced, but it really is worth worth a watch. It's very riveting, very sad, unfortunately, as well, because we're talking about the provenance of titles and land in this country, and it's become such a big problem that we've dedicated now almost 2 years in terms of research and work into looking into the various aspects of land corruption in Kenya. And if you're a victim of it, our apologies, but we are open to telling your story. Let us know through info@africauncensored.net. But all of that a little later. First, we've got Sam in studio with us. Sam, take us through what it was like producing now the second series of Title Deals. There's going to be a couple more episodes, but episode 1 was incredibly riveting to watch. Tell us just briefly what it was like producing this series, this season.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. And first of all, I want to thank my colleague, Joy, for the great teamwork that we've done, handling so many papers for the longest time. First, when we did the Title Deals series 1, it was a lot of work for us, and the impact is what led us to having the part 2 of Title Deals. We had a lot of people who reacted. We had so many people who brought new ideas, many cases, but we had to at least embark on a specific stories that we could deliver.
Yeah.
In this context, it was about unmasking what goes behind that we rarely talk about. It was exposing the system, the rot in the system. Because Title Deals 1, we had several cases, like what we had in Westlands. There is this story of land by companies, people being conned. And also we had people forging documents and taking advantage of succession and creating their own documents to advance their own interest. And now we are here.
And we are here indeed. And if you look at some of the comments, it is very worrying that, and Erica just mentioned off camera that there are a couple of people who can see themselves in this story. But if you were to pitch this to everybody who's watching now and anyone who will watch this episode, what was your objective? Who needs to watch this, and why should they watch this?
First, this story is about James Mungai and his family, of course. He inherited a land, but he cannot invest in that land just because there are some people who work in this government who are there to create or to forge documents and give that land to cartels. This is a story that we documented in Thika, but it's not a Thika story. This is a story that relates to each and every person, the thousands of Kenyans who are not able to secure their inheritance, people who are unable to invest in the land that they have inherited. It's quite a sad story. And I believe as we embark on this engagement, we'll be able to give more details about it.
Okay. One of the things that is hardly spoken about, Justine, I don't know if you'll agree with me, is the fact that in as much as we understand that, the Lands Office will likely have some sort of involvement with this, there'll be some corrupt people who obviously want to undermine the system. We don't often discuss the role of professionals in land corruption. These ones, the ones I want to speak about specifically, are lawyers, because you can't do a land transaction with lawyers. I don't know, have you had this kind of experience? And Sam, maybe you can also speak to the same. Nobert too, right? Because all of us, tunajua hizi shida za mashamba is very serious. In every family, we've had this kind of issue. Have you had this experience where the professional themselves are then, not doing well in terms of ethics and really leading people down the garden path?
I would say, first of all, I am not a victim, but technically a victim, because we had a succession issue in my family. We ended up losing 6 of my mom's properties.
6.
Yeah, 6. Shout out to that thief. He was dedicated. That was amazing. Like, you took all of them. You could have left one. I was the last born. You know, like, I needed the land. I was
Like,
4
it's
years
funny,
old.
but it's sad, man. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
So 6 of those properties disappeared, and we only were left with 1. And because a lot of this is very personal information, but like at the time of my mom's passing, there was no one who was old enough to kind of check the property. So by the time everyone was getting there, even like her friend who was a lawyer was apparently kind of involved in it disappearing.
Yeah.
So you can't really trust anyone. It's like you have to do the burden of the work of having the property in the right details and having all your children listed and like everything that needs to be correct, you have to have that.
Yeah.
And you have to have a cosign from another family member who's just as dedicated to doing a good job. And then you have to have some kind of a backup lawyer.
Yeah.
And I think at the time when...
Backup for the...
Yeah, a backup for the backup. Because like KPLC, everything can disappear.
And by the way, guys, just thank you for mentioning that. We are late today, not through our own fault, but Kenyans will understand when blackouts come. Sometimes they come without warning. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah.
This is really important. Please finish your point.
Because I think for a system that it's designed, and I think Sam has seen this in his work, it's designed to kind of not only take away what you have, but make it very difficult to keep it. So I think that's where the intersection of where professionals and like the change and the shift in which corruption is designed, like people need to figure out how to break that system down, because it's not just about the big guys at the top, it's also about the interpersonal relationships that cannot hold if someone else with a bigger check comes through. Yeah.
Listen to this. In 2014, right, the Advocacy and Legal Advisory Centers reported that 14% of the cases reported to them involve land succession. Some of the problems: lack of awareness, relevant laws and existing models, weak understanding of land and inaccessibility of land-related complaint mechanisms, and diminished accountability from leaders and institutions, and we would count lawyers as part of that.
Yes.
No, but I know we're here to discuss podcasts, but I mean, land is a very personal thing to everybody. Have you had similar experiences, or perhaps through degrees of separation, something that indicates to you that the ethical standards within our legal profession, the legal professions in terms of protecting people's rights to land are not being respected?
Absolutely. I think it's what you said earlier. It's almost every Kenyan has a story. I would echo it's probably something similar. It's an ongoing affair at the moment. It's a succession story on my dad's side, and now it's him and his dad and all the shenanigans that are coming through that. But what you see, again, the lawyers, and I've seen him try to navigate different practitioners, and now his last resort was, let me find a lawyer who is a relative.
Yeah.
Someone at least who I think will fight for my interests. I can tell you it has not worked out well either. So yeah, it's a problem.
It's
Blood is not thicker than water. I think that with you guys.
Sam, sorry, tell me.
Like, the biggest problem we have in this country is that we have professional people who have become very corrupt, and they are using their positions to corrupt the system. You find that people are getting title deeds, quote unquote, legally. They are using those title deeds to acquire land, but they are not following the due process. You're not buying land, but they are taking advantage of a situation that we have in the country, the succession. 99-year lease is expiring in this period. So we have so many people who are interested in that kind of particular. If you look at even most of these cases that you're hearing, the succession issues, mostly they come in the context of this succession. We've become a gangster paradise where everyone is roaming freely. All cartels are roaming freely, and nobody cares. about the ethical standards that are supposed to be happening, whether they are engineers, whether they are lawyers, whether they are land surveyors.
So this is
everywhere.
This is a wider systemic problem in our country, where professions that are supposed to be the guardrails for, protecting the ethical standards in every single profession. Now we're speaking about land, are not doing that, and perhaps are doing that because of money. Did you see that in the story?
Let me use one example. There is a DCI officer that we highlighted in that story.
Yeah.
Instead of investigating corruption deals, he's the one who is supposed now to be investigated for being involved in corrupt deals. Where should an owner of land who needs to his case to be investigated go?
Yeah.
These are the people who are mandated to investigate and bring law and order into this society.
Yeah.
But you find they are the corrupt people. They are the people who are creating all these problems. For this case, you realize that this is an informed victim. James is well conversant with the law.
Yeah.
And he tried to go to each and every office, whether it's Thika, whether it's in Kiambu Road, the head of DCI, whether it's in immigration office. But you realize that even those guys who have been accused, some of them have been promoted. What happens in this country?
That's absolutely, it's absolutely shameful. And when I was just looking through the comments as you were giving your comment about the DCI officer in that story, and some of the comments reference how these days, if you buy a piece of land, right, the first thing that you do, fence it. The second thing that you do is that you take your title deed to a bank, take a loan, and so that there's some sort of secondary documentation that then underpins your right of ownership. And so the question becomes, do we now need a backup for a backup, right? A backup for a backup. And what would that be, Justine? Yeah.
I don't know what the backup for the backup should be.
Yeah.
But our backup should be to leave this system entirely. Because
leave the system entirely.
Yeah, because how can you convince people to continually put their property shielded when the system itself is the one that's taking it away from them?
Yeah.
Because if we don't adjust or fix, as Sam is saying, because if the DCI is the person who's, I will take the money and be the problem, how many of that, there are people who cannot survive this. There are people who can pay their way out of it. And that's already tragic in itself. But the fact that we are even having this discussion is where the problem lies. I don't think there's any kind of saving us from this system if we are not willing to get out of it. There has to be some way to draw a line.
Okay, no, but go ahead.
I would argue it's not a system though. It's people. So even if I replace the system and I bring back people and I bring back the same set of core values that we are operating with, it's still going to be corrupted.
So is the fault in our stars or in ourselves, Nobert?
I believe it's in ourselves, and to your point earlier, this is not just the lawyers, it's in almost every other profession, and especially when you find professions where there's a significant information advantage with the practitioner. I'm going to the engineer, I'm going to the lawyer, I'm going to the doctor. I have to just agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I'm not trained,
They say the fish starts to rot from the head.
From the head.
If the captain of this place we call 254 is one of the people accused of land grabbing, what do you expect? The trickle-down effect is what is happening.
That's interesting, Sam, that you mentioned that. And I remember having a small debate online, not online, on our WhatsApp group about including Edwin Sifuna, Senator Sifuna's soundbite at the beginning of our trailer. And the trailer starts by saying something like, if you elect a thief, then thievery is what you expect. From a journalistic point of view, that became something that I really wrestled with. But when you go and look at our head of state's, track record, including court records in which he's said to have stolen or have been involved with the theft of public property, you know, and I'm just looking for black bags right now. It then does tell you about the problem that we have in society. And I don't know, yes, you know, we can say that the fault is in ourselves, but where is the role of systems, right? Right now, because those systems are supposed to save us from ourselves. And every country has systems that are guardrails to save everybody from the worst excesses of the people in that country. So then, again, the question becomes, what systems do we then have in place to be able to save ourselves? Sam?
The systems are in place, but they are not working. We have a good land registry with all the documents.
Yeah.
But you'll find that guys go to that office and they collaborate with cartels. They get forged documents, the ones we were calling the original fakes, and they can be used to transact business. We have police officers who are supposed to investigate.
Yeah.
They are collaborating and even giving stamps to the cartels. We have lawyers who have their law firms collaborating with these cartels to justify these transactions. Where do we go as a country?
Where do we go indeed? Sam, can you give us a bit of a hint about what episode 2 is going to be like?
There is something popular about housing.
Kionjo too. Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it for everybody.
I will not preempt, but it's good to know that Nairobi is growing and the population is increasing, and we have a history on where we come from.
Yeah.
And there is an issue of expanding or creating some housing projects, and there are some people who are expected to lose their houses that they've been living since independence.
Yeah.
So let me leave it at that.
Leave it at that. I'm not going to add much more. Sam, our head of investigations, thank you very much for joining us on The Big Picture. He's usually behind the camera, by the way. So today, vile amejaribu kujitokeza na kujieleza, tunampongeza sana, si ndio?
Thank you.
Right? So Title Deals Season 2, Episode 1 is already live. It's been live for now almost 24 hours. And it's a fantastic, fantastic exposition of what exactly is going on in the country with regard to land deals, and specifically the tenure of land and the provenance of our title deeds. Episode 1 of Title Deals, which is live now, and as Sam mentioned, Episode 2 is on the way on the 27th of April, I should say, and it's going to be a cracker of an episode. Like, guys, if you're not following this series, it's such a great exposition and speaks to various parts of our systemic problems. But here's a taste now of what Episode 2 is going to be like. Take a look.
In the next episode,
Watu wa Islands.
Nairobi's old estates are turning into a battlefield.
The county government of Nairobi have the titles for Ofafa Jericho, Jericho Lumumba, Ofafa Maringo, and Maringo or not.
Nani walikaa chini wakasema ianze Jericho?
Tuliahidiwa ya kwamba baada ya miaka 25 hizi nyumba zitakuwa zetu.
Hakukuwa na title deed, isipokuwa ni hicho kijikitabu ambacho kilikuwa na maelezo kwa upande wa nyuma.
As plans to demolish these estates gather momentum, who really wins, who loses, and what is the true cost of redevelopment?
There are a lot of challenges. Key amongst them is a total lack of transparency. Yani ukora ni mingi sana hii Nairobi.
All right, guys, let's move on to the next topic very swiftly. We have been reading through what has been some seminal work around podcasting in Kenya. And I guess for many of you who listen to podcasts, such as The Big Picture, maybe, for many of you who listen to podcasts or watch your video podcasts, you will have known this for some time, but there's been a shift from people who observe and understand and look at their lives and their worlds through the lens of various podcasters. Podcasting in Kenya and podcasters have become very, very influential. And now OdipoDev, our very, very good partners, I should say, and a data insights company have been working on this and have talked about the rise of influencers for quite some time. And let me just run you down some of the top podcasters in Kenya in terms of the number of views per video and total views. So the top 5 right now Abel Mutua, Lynn Ngugi, the Three-Man Army, Dr. Kingori, and Maureen Actress Lifestyle. Some of these people I have seen, some I admit. I admit I have not seen, but one of the ones that I have seen and I have had the pleasure of being on their podcast is Iko Nini. So today, can I be the one to say Iko Nini? Welcome to the show, Mwafreeka. Thanks a lot for coming to the big picture.
Yeah.
Much appreciated for coming through. And obviously, next to him, Mnati Mwingine, culture lead in OdipoDev, the man who was responsible for the research, Nobert Mburu. And next to him, another person who's a wewe ni podcaster kweli ama ni kuappear tu kwa people's podcast?
I love appearing in people's podcast. Mwafreeka has had me before, so this is like super awesome to do that, like an inverse thing.
Oh wait,
yeah,
you've been on his podcast. Hey, wait, we are winning, my friend. Yes. Hey, man, forget millions. We've been on Mwafreeka's podcast.
Exactly.
So let me start. Let me then start with you, Mwafreeka.
Yeah.
What do you think has informed that change? Like when you look at your audience and how you've been able to grow it. First of all, we call episode gani sa 300 and what?
447.
447.
Yeah.
So 447 episodes deep into Iko Nini. What's been that shift that you've noticed in terms of people's consumption of your content and of other people's content that justifies the kind of research that we're seeing about podcasters?
I'd say the reason why people like podcasts is it's the place where you can talk about things that are maybe taboo subjects on mainstream media. Because the fact that still traditional media still relies on direct advertisement, while for us, we have the buffer of especially YouTube, where YouTube is the one that deals with the advertisers, then we can be independent. So with that in mind, there is no subject that's taboo. While with, for example, mainstream media, if you feel like Safaricom has done something wrong, you have to approach it in a very delicate way because you don't want to offend the biggest advertiser in Kenya. So I feel like that's maybe the reason why people gravitate towards that. Then also partly the flowery language. Hey, there it's allowed. So people feel like it's the way they talk wakiwa kwa mtaa. For example, I think with Iko Nini, that's the thing that I keep hearing, like especially from the diaspora crowd. They always like, every time we listen to you, we feel like we're still back at home. So I feel like that has played a role in making podcast bigger. And then the fact that nowadays we also consume content through smartphones and podcasts. If you go on YouTube and you want that long form content as you do something else, you can also consume podcasts.
You can listen to it.
Yes.
So when you were starting Iko Nini, because you had like a huge legacy in radio, right? And then transferring all of that skill into Iko Nini, did you think about it in terms of building a platform, or what was the objective for you in starting Iko Nini?
I have to be honest, it was supposed to be just fun. It was not supposed to be like what it turned into.
Banter too, and you just wanted to
play. So I remember it's because a friend of mine, it's called DJ Zach. So DJ Zach used to work on Homeboys Radio. We worked together up here to get a radio. So he's the one who kept telling me that we need to do a podcast, we need to do a pod. So I always remember like this specific day. It's May, I think it was May 25th, 2021. So we are neighbors, and I've told him, sawa ndakuja. So I went, because he lived downstairs. I went downstairs and we sat on his couch and we did the first episode. And it's just called mic and light testing. So you can even see we didn't know how to set the phone. So you can see lines going up and down.
Yeah.
There was poor lighting. But then I just loved the sort of conversation that it was, because it was, first of all, radio restricts you to 2 minutes maximum. So you have to like say everything you want to say in 2 minutes. And then the next link, you have to come up with something different. While with podcast, we can have this one long conversation. So I remember I enjoyed that. And by the time we reached episode 8, I was the one now asking him to shoot lead. You see, now it had shifted from him to me. And then I'd say like the thing that now made me feel like there was something here, I always give credit to the diaspora crowd, because when they discovered the podcast, they started supporting us financially. I think by episode 8, we were already getting like some cash.
Really?
From people.
So sahi Iko Nini iko independent. Kasongo anaweza kuja achukue yake.
Yeah, so by episode 8, I think someone sent us like 5K. Nikashika, umetutumia 5K juu ya hii show. Kwa nini? Like, this does not make sense to me. So with that, now it made us want to do more and more. And hapo ndio tukafika hapa. Yeah.
No, but do you think what Mwafreeka said in terms of the length of the conversation and the depth to which you can go to is the secret sauce? And what did you guys find in your research is that thing that motivates people to now shift away from their traditional, media consumption habits to now consuming podcasts like Iko Nini?
I would say it's a mix of factors, and that's the length of conversation definitely matters. I think with the length of conversation, I'd say it's a factor of I didn't know what I wanted until I saw it. It was, I've been following Mwafreeka on radio for this long.
You see, Mwafreeka, that's the one thing that I told him when I went onto the podcast. It's like, I've been following you for a long ass time. And now I've got an opportunity to have this extended conversation.
And so you have all these beloved voices, and because again, think about the podcast thing, for at least in our market, it's a very recent phenomenon. So it was a case of, I didn't know I had an option to hear Mwafreeka for 2 hours, So just the introduction of that option to people, I think I did not know I needed this, but I actually really loved this. But one thing also we also saw, it's and that's why I say it's a mix of factors, because there's a structural element to it as well, which is, so you have the shift to digital overall, with smartphones, with the internet, with social. I'd say the first wave of this really revolved around social. So social media, rise of the influencers in the first wave. And again, a lot of what influencers ran on was intimacy. It was raw access. It was, this is not scripted, and so they build sort of these communities around themselves. And what we saw with what, again, as podcasts have really rode on, is where I was giving you, because again, now social media also has limits around output length. So it's sort of the restrictions you'd see in radio. But suddenly, they're given this option again, I can spend 2 hours versus the 30 seconds or the 60 seconds I was being given on social. You have a lot more to say with an algorithm that actually favors long-form content versus the 10-second, 15-second bites. So I'd say it has been a congruence of factors that has really brought it together. And, you see it even with the platforms where this thing started as audio. But now a lot of it is riding on YouTube, which is a video platform, which again, just by them being a free platform, it being huge in Kenya, over 10 million users here. So you have all these things that just sort of wave that wind on. But I'd say the intimacy of it, the authentic conversations, I think as Mwafreeka has pointed to, that's really what we've seen is keeping people connected.
But in as much as we're talking about a digital shift, right? Mwafreeka, I don't know whether this is something you'll see, and Nobert, maybe you can chime in as well before we turn to Justine. We talk about a digital shift as if it's happened for everybody, right? So in Kenya, yes, there's very, very deep internet penetration. I think we're somewhere around 74-75%, right? But in terms of internet usage, those numbers then now dip quite a bit. We're now hovering just slightly above 30% to 35% in Nairobi, much lower in rural areas. So is it really true that podcasters have begun to shape influence with this kind of limited slice of the pie? Ama it's just that, because it's in the cities and it's because with people who can share quickly, etc., you guys have much louder voice than you do have, the amount of audience, I guess. Yeah.
Can I go first?
Yeah, sure.
So you're right. So if you think about access, number one, I'd say it starts at device level. So there was a statistic from Communications Authority. We have about 40 million smartphones in this country now. That's higher than the adult population we have, by almost 10 million. All right. So
higher than the adult population.
Yes. And so So just at an access level, the desire among adults, at least, is there for internet access. So where we sit now with smartphone penetration is significant. And a lot of our digital revolution has been smartphone driven, right? So we are seeing, the sellers have worked really hard to bring the cost of devices down. The technology has really improved. So access is there at least device level.
Yeah.
So the next thing you're just missing now is, internet access. So whether that's Wi-Fi, whether that's bundles, that just becomes the next hurdle. But I'm always reminded of airtime and how airtime became, quote unquote, a necessity. All right. You go 20, 25 years ago, you look at people's budgets, that was not a significant budget line. But the more that becomes a utility in your life, the more it becomes essential. Now it's a fixed cost, to be able to make calls. I believe internet is getting there.
Yeah.
All right. So I would say there's where we are. I would look at the trend line. Where are we coming from? How far has it come? Where does it go? And to answer your question on influence, it's the same thing. So we've been observing this. We like to call it the alternative ecosystem. So it's a mix of influencers, is what we saw in the first wave. We've now seen digital media. So we released a piece last year again of how digital media outlets, and these are basically outlets which are running purely online, mainly on social media. They've taken a huge chunk of attention for news, and you have outlets like NGC, Nairobi Gossip Club, becoming literally the top news outlet we have.
I saw that during Mandamano, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
and that's where it really shows in our critical moments. Where do people go looking for information? So you have the digital news outlets as the second pillar. And then now we are seeing podcasts again as another pillar that is moving, that shifts.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's always a trend line. This thing is moving.
It's moving in that direction. Okay.
Yes.
Mwafreeka, I want to come to you, and then Justine, now also you chime in, because Apo Online, you've got very big presence, right? You mentioned something important. So it's in those big moments, right, that people then now know who to trust and who to turn to. Mwafreeka, we have a very big moment possibly coming up in 2027, constitutionally. If you're using Willis, if we're using Willis's, it's June.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of the calendar of our politics, if you're using Willis Otieno's logic, then it could be a year earlier.
Yeah.
But 2027 seems like it's going to be incredibly pivotal, not just for the politics of the country and what's happening, but in terms of who is going to be informing people on how to think about the things that they're thinking about. Do you count yourself as one of those people? Because I see your monologues, we watch you fairly often, like at the gym in the mornings. You have your 8-minute, 10-minute monologues where you're talking about, various parts of, Kenyan siasa, controversy. There was one we were watching about Millicent Omanga and Susan Kihika, and I was like, what? Huyu tunamwombea. But do you think that you're one of those voices that now is starting to shape how people are thinking about the things that they ought to think about?
Yeah, at some point, maybe I thought that was not the case, but recently, because of Francis Gaido, I feel like that's the case.
What happened? Tell us.
Because Gaido has been attacking me for saying that in 2027, we don't need to look for a perfect candidate. We have to know that there has to be compromises. And with that, I always quote Obama. I don't know if you ever saw the Obama quote where he was saying that new liberals had this idea that someone has to be perfect to be able to run for this. And they'd go dig into someone's past and find out 30 years ago, you did something, you said something, and they'd be like, we can't deal with this person.
Yeah.
And so with the same mentality, I've been saying that, yes, we want radical change. So we want a Maraga, if possible. We want an Omtata, someone who will come in and say zero corruption. But that might not be the reality. So when I see now someone like Gaido say that this guy has been paid by the government to make us lose hope, it shows me that, okay, maybe people are listening. And people feel like if I say that, sijalipwa, musemaga kutakuwa na signs, hakuna signs so far. So, sijalipwa plus, I always feel like, hata kama ni kusell out, what are you selling out for? There are a few things that are, I think there's one thing that I like saying, and I heard Abel say it in a different way. Abel was saying that he was approached when the government was doing really badly. He was approached and offered some money, and he was like, there's no need to offer me money, just do what you're supposed to do. And that has always been like my mantra. Pia inakuwaga like simple, like haunid kulipa mtu yote. You don't even need to bribe parliament. You know, when you hear all these stories of the president has bribed parliament to do 1, 2, 3 things, you're like, if you did your job, Kenyans would defend you. You don't need, you need the people more than you need the legislators. But in Kenya, we always feel like the president is more like indebted to the MPs than to the people. So as long as he makes them happy, ya jali juu yetu. Remember like the attitude ya last year kwa the protest. Ilikuwa tutafanya kile tunataka kufanya. But then the people are like, no, this time it's different. And the government had to resort to violence. So I feel like with these voices, when we tell people that don't forget, at the end of the day, the government has the monopoly of violence. So with this in mind, for example, how do you make sure that, for example, if Saizin, I think nimeona kitu online, I don't know, I saw it from Kennedy Moredhi, he'd said that the next IBC chair is either Amadi or Charles Nyachai.
Charles Nyachai, yeah.
There are videos of Charles Nyachai campaigning for Ruto. So, swali ni, how is this referee going to be fair?
I think he was in the disputes, the disputes resolution committee of UDA.
Yo sasa ilikuwa nani? Yo ilikuwa this other one, what's her name? Joyce Mdivo.
Mdivo.
Yeah, that was Mdivo.
Yes.
With Nyachai, there's actually a video of him on top of the car. Kiambia watu, Ruto we, ndiye atakuwa. So, and then Ruto appointed him. Yes. Then Ruto come appoint as the head of Kenya School of Government. So he's the chair. So constitutionally, any chair and a state officer is not supposed to run for your kiti.
Yeah.
But tumeruka hiyo loophole. So this guy is going to be the referee. And if the ref tayari amevaa jazi ya yellow, lazima amjue. The only way to defeat him is to come out in numbers. So sisi kuna watu tumekuwa tukisema the gap has to be so big that it becomes, you know, like there's nothing you can do about it.
And that's an interesting way of putting it. And Justine, maybe because you're always doing stuff that's it's critical of government. And I mean, you know, to be fair. But when you're doing it, whose voice do you have in your head? Is it the people's voice or is it your voice? And how do you thread that line between authenticity, like speaking authentically as yourself? And I think that's the same thing with you, that you struggle with, right? The authentic voice, but also representing what the people have to say. In your commentary, in your skits, in the stuff that you post online, and in the podcasts that you also listen to.
I actually use my mom's voice. I just guess what she sounds like, because I think my family has very stark people who you can see how their choices have influenced the kind of direction they have taken politically. And I am a constant hater. I put it out. They know I don't approve of their choices because I'm using my mom's voice. It's the only reason. I'm like, you people should be thinking about what you value. And if I'm critical about my family in that way, I try and think, if I'm putting this energy in my family like this, why shouldn't I hold other people to the same standard? Because it would have been very odd if I just kind of side with my friends and their flip-floppy nature when it comes to very critical issues about the country, about governance. Like if I mostly, and I'm sorry to say this, like I'm mostly always trying to find that kukeleleshwa voice, because people need to be told and reminded, because I think there's a point where, and this is to your point about we don't need a perfect candidate, but also what are our choices? Like that fight is also just as much of a big fight as it is winning the election, because we could go back to back on Kasongos. We've seen it with like ICC candidates.
I mean, look at the suggestions that are coming out, for instance, with Dr. Fred Matiang'i as an example. And, you know, look, this is, okay, when I speak, just listen to me as a journalist, right? And how I tend to work allegedlys and what have you, and try and see if you can thread through and find the message. This is what I see when I see Dr. Fred Matiang'i. I see a person who is perceived as a performer because of his role in the Ministry of Education. As a journalist who has investigated extrajudicial killings, I see the person who was in charge of the Ministry of the Interior. And so for me, the choice is very stark. Like, why is this guy even in the conversation? So like when you're talking about the imperfect candidate and the choices that we have, sometimes I sit back and wonder, okay, fine, all right, what real choice do we really have, in this election, and how do we ensure that whatever choice we're left with, right, becomes this person or on whose hopes we can pin, on who we can pin our hopes, right? Sorry, I've just gone down a rabbit hole, kiasi, because this is really supposed to be about podcasting. And the question, what I want to try and drive at is, what makes my voice more credible than your voice? What makes your voice, Mwafreeka, more credible than my voice as a podcaster, when even now talking about things like this? Like, I've given my opinion, right? So Matiang'i doesn't seem to be the right person for the job, but when people are judging what I'm saying, are they judging it on the basis of fact, right? Or on the basis of their opinions? Because we're in a post-truth world, and I think maybe the research can also bear you out, right? Where people's opinions are people's opinions, and that's kind of how the wheels go round and round, right? So how do we then now pass what is fact, what is not, and who should we listen to?
Can I just go first?
Yeah.
I know a lot of podcasts that I listen to across the board, like Kenyan podcasts and podcasts across different continents. You figure out that people want their opinion sometimes to be the loudest or the funniest, but like, what is the conversation really about? Because I think there's an entertainment factor that's valued a lot across podcasts. I think, Mwafreeka, you understand this truly, but at the same time, that the entertainment factor has been used as a weapon almost against the listeners. Some people are not that well informed about different topics. So when you bring someone in your podcast and you call that person an expert, and you kind of use your voice, which is very powerful, to vouch for that person, people trust you because they listen to you. And then they sometimes take the person who's on the podcast voice as fact. And then maybe they're just like a yapper who read a book once, and then that they stuck with that opinion. They never sought another opinion, and then that becomes like their grounding factor.
Yeah.
And because people trust you, they take that as the information that they should wield across different platforms. I think in a post-truth world, one of the most important things I think podcasters can do is to hold the line for the truth and continually make sure that whoever is in there with them, if they don't have enough facts. And when I was on your podcast, I think you asked something that was very, very difficult for me at the time. And I told you, I don't know. And I insisted. And I think I kind of got you mad a little bit, but honestly, I didn't have the information. And in that moment in time, I didn't have any more information than someone who had read blogs on the internet. So if I had stood in certainty and been like, no, you cannot do this and you cannot say this about these people, I would have been absolutely wrong. And I don't think I would have been able to live with myself after the fact. Right now, maybe I have more information, but I'm still not 100%. And I'm okay being in that position. And I feel like more people should be like, I don't know. I'm just, and Bill Burr, one of my favorite comedians, does this all the time. He's like, I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
You have to do a little more research. Let's stop listening to some random guy with that cadence. Everything. Like, especially if a guy is on a podcast talking in a John-Allan Namu voice, be very wary.
Surely I was just seated here. Justine. Anyway, look, you're guy.
No, he is an award-winning journalist. You should listen to him.
In a John-Allan Namu voice.
They actually do use that cadence. Like, you see how you moderate your words and you think through about what you're saying.
Yeah.
The people who use that cadence.
Oh, so they're not just
weaponize
like
kujinga.
nitakudanganya.
Yes, they literally speak like
So that's how I talk like that. I talk like a...
That's how you sound like in my head.
Oh my gosh.
That's how my mom feel like.
The voice of lions.
Yeah.
Unauza kitu. Mwafreeka. Look, I mean, same question, right? So, you know, you're out there every day talking about really sensitive political matters, right? Why should people trust you, right? So is it your facts, the facts according to Mwafreeka, or is it the facts according to what Mwafreeka has researched and actually has gone and done the work? Because that's a question. And no, but I guess the rider to this is, in the article that we published on the Podcasters Are Coming, you start with that Kasmuel Makaure episode with Mic Check, right? And how people were upset. Why are you bringing this guy on? So I guess the other side to it is, how do you maintain objectivity, right? Like when it's your voice, right? And how do podcasters and people of influence maintain objectivity when the crowd is telling them, the audience is telling them, "Wewe usimlete mtu." I have my own personal story to share, but mtaanza. Let's start with you, Mwa.
I think normally I feel like my facts are based on research. So for example, like the Matiang'i thing, I've done 2 videos on his comeback. And in the 2 videos, I've talked about the extrajudicial killings. Because I remember, I think one I watched on African Uncensored, ile Rivayala, yes? It's the one. So, look, like, we can't separate this guy from those killings. So now we have to ask ourselves, if we are saying that Ruto anatuua, how then do we get a guy who, apart from extrajudicial killings, kulikuwa na hii, like, I shared a headline from the Standard, and the headline was "Lots of Impunity," and there was Matiang'i there, because he was the guy who was known for disregarding court orders. So you have to think about such a guy. If he was doing this as a CS, what will he do as a president? Because as much as we lie to ourselves, we have to realize that in Kenya, presidents are somehow above the law. If you think about it critically, you'll see these guys, they can do anything they want. If they are called kwenda kotini, si lazima wafanye, you know, they don't have to follow court orders. Remember Uhuru and the 6 judges? So that's what I normally do. So what normally gets me in trouble, Neo, like when the fan is listening to you at home, they expect you to always say bad things about someone. So the minute you come and say, like, you know what, this, through my research, this looks interesting. Hiyo time unakuwa umelipwa. So like, for example, the Shah thing, Shiley twing is in trouble. Because I was like, if this is executed, it looks like a really noble idea, you know. So Kenya akisikia hivyo kwa anachukia Kasongo, itakuwa umelipwa. So every time someone says nimelipwa, I always feel like it somehow to a certain level, it, I don't know what, validates me. Because it shows me, yes, I'm not telling you what you want to hear. Because otherwise it's easier to just kuswitch nini na kusema every time Kasongo is bad. But time yote kuna kitu yote which I feel like hapa kumenda vizuri, ndasema like, hapa kumenda vizuri. Another thing that I remember got me in trouble was, remember the call between Morara and the president? Remember at that point, Morara could do nothing wrong. Mina ilo ujinga yangu, nishaenda pala, Iko Nini, niko like, I don't expect a president to call any individual. Umelipwa, Ruto yuko desperate. Niko like, he's desperate, but to call a random Kenyan, haiwezi happen. So every time watu sema nimelipwa, sema like, I'm doing my job. That's how I feel like. So that's my own balance, to my own way. And then with another thing, I always tell people that unlike mainstream media, I don't have to be neutral. I always feel like I've taken a side, and my side is I need freedom of expression to maintain. And like with the Matiang'i thing, I was saying that I'm not 100% sure that a podcast like Iko Nini can survive under a Matiang'i presidency, you know. And with Ruto, we were worried, but we're still there. Matiang'i, I feel like from what I've seen from the outside, when he was a CS, he's too...
He's Princey.
Yeah.
So, Princey.
It has like such bad principle energy. And I think I have a follower.
My gosh.
No,
we writing down some of these videos just.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
You see how, you remember a whale ate the sea cables. You remember that conversation when like the internet was shut down at some point during Maandamano? Like, I don't know if people on the online or digital media space worry about not technically how the government frames the misuse of the internet and using that as an excuse to shut down either not just people's voices, but the threat of shutting down the internet. Like, is that something you worry about? And if so, what is like a point of rallying that you can encourage your listeners to like stand by to make sure that it never comes to that? You know, like when you project like Matiang'i could be that person who actually makes sure everything is shut down. But it's not above the administration we have in place because they've acted in certain ways. And their story doesn't check out because Kenyans on the internet are very busy. Like, we are on a very big Moshene club. We will ask people, we will investigate, we'll get to the root of the problem. But what's an approach that you get your listeners to be like, okay, we might disagree, but we need to be able to keep talking to each other. Like, how do we fight them not shutting down the internet?
Oh, that one of shutting down the internet, because I think they tried it last year. I don't know if you remember last year, they sent out some letters through KFCB. It was like for you to film anything within the Kenyan borders, you have to. So, yeah.
They think that
they will.
They will bring that back.
So with that, when that happened, I think, as you know, how Kenya Kwanza operates, they create a problem, provide the solution, then they ask for tuwapigie makofi. So they were like, just disregard that thing and let's move on. But to me, I feel like that is still that secret, whatever weapon that they have, that at some point, wanaweza kama waseme, why are you operating without a license? And when that happens, and then pia, like during that shutdown, ilikuwa ni 25th, when the internet went down. So I was talking to someone else and they were saying that allegedly what happened afterwards was a few service providers that there used to be this central place. Ni mtu wa internet alini-explain, I don't know if I explained the right way, but kuna vile cables zote zikifika Mombasa, they used to go to this government center. And after that shutdown, a few providers decided to get outside of that system. So that means that in 2027, it's going to be much harder to shut down the internet as compared to ile happened majuzi. So, and that pia with what's it called, with Starlink, hiyo tunafikiria that the internet can still be there. So now, hii yetu, I think it's simple. It's just, let's just go back to abductions. I feel like hiyo ndio kitu naona watafanya. But shutting down the internet, sort of come abductions, na kasi abductions, they'll do the license thing.
And you know, actually, for me, it's not, and Nobert, I'll bring you in just now. It's not the shutting down of the internet that I'm worried about. Or rather that I think that they are worried about, or that they should be worried about, right? For me, it is the spiraling nature of violence in our country right now, right? And Mwaf, Justine, Nobert, I'm sure you guys have seen this. And 2 weeks or so ago, there was this cruise liner that docked in Mombasa, and the tourists came down and they were going and touring Mombasa, and then a gang of like many guys, 40, 50 guys brandishing machetes, etc., attacked them at Pembezandovu, which is essentially in the middle of the Mombasa CBD, and it just melted into the crowd, right? Before that, the week before that, and the weeks before that, Ruto had been having rallies in Nairobi, etc., and we saw what happened. For me, that question of the monopoly of violence is the one that I think is going to keep our internet on. Because any person in the security sector worth their salt will want a free flow of information and at least the opportunity to contradict it when that channel is open, right? People forget, in 2007, the media was essentially shut down. Remember, live broadcasts were stopped. What did that do for the nature of violence in the country? It exploded, right? And so anybody worth their salt who's in the security sector, who's thinking about these podcasters, right? And how it is that they're upset about them, will be thinking about how to work with them. Now the question is the salt question. Do we have people worth their salt sitting in these places who would be able to think about what the wider consequence of an internet shutdown or of shutting down Mwafreeka or shutting down Justine would be for the audiences that care about these people? That for me is the real question. And that's where I think that's where the line is. No, but please, yeah.
I think I always like to think of the underlying principle.
Yeah.
When I hear everything we're talking about, this is about power, but it's not about trust. All right. So media as a tool of power, in my opinion, is the biggest tool of power. It's the most flexible. With digital tools now, it's the most prevalent. Right. If you have control of how that information is flowing, if you have control of what people are consuming, it's a significant tool, and that's why it's an actual serious issue.
Yeah.
All right. And that's why they're gonna come for you guys, because it's a serious asset that you now have. All right. But back to your earlier question of why Mwafreeka, why Abel, why whoever it is, that's a shift of trust. All right. And that's a bigger trend that we've been seeing, because it's been the rejection of a lot of where trust used to be domiciled in the past, which used to be very institutional. And so I think even last year, especially, Maandamano showed a lot of that shifting. So we've had our relationship with government for the longest time. This has not been there. We saw the church thing happen, all right? Which again, in a moment of truth, how church was behaving, it
was contradictory to what the people were feeling.
Right? Businesses, corporations, we saw what has been happening in Safaricom. People are quite clear that those guys are not fighting for us either. All right. So we've alongside the post-truth thing is a post-trust thing, because it's in all of this, who do I trust? And a lot of that has been personalized. It's been brought into my personal circle and in my interest and now with digital platforms that allow you so many voices, so many corners, you can now find your corner of like, I trust Justine's voice, I trust Mwafreeka's voice, I trust, and I stick with those guys. All right. The danger with that, and now is sort of what we've seen, like in the US, what's happening in the US is now, it's when everyone starts living their private world, and it creates a lot of a significant danger of this. Finding consensus becomes really difficult. Because as he says, as long as you say anything that is contrary to what I believe, I'm like, umelipwa. And so we've seen it's influencer could just say anything about a product where umelipwa now. I say, we know why you're saying that. So you come say an opinion to big government has paid you. So it's going to be messy. It's going to be really messy. And one of the questions I've been really pondering is, and when we were speaking, I was like, it's almost like we are giving free advice to Gava on how to oppress us. But I was just like,
maybe whisper it.
We need to whisper it. Will it be an information warfare scenario, or will we just go back to the streets?
I think I have an answer, plus another question that goes to you and Mwafreeka.
Okay. Wait, as we are answering, we are running short of time. I wish we had much more time to delve into this, but answer quickly. Ask a question. Let's see if we can have.
Mine is very short. I think the information warfare was done with Cambridge Analytica in 2017, yes. And it was very effective because some people didn't even know it was happening. I was one of the people who didn't know it was happening because I was speaking directly to the people who are voting, but I didn't know like a big collection of people were actually just divesting from other forms of information and were in their own cocoons trying to get information from random places. Things are coming to your WhatsApp. It's being forwarded. So I think we've been there. And I feel like if anything, Kenya is a case study of what misinformation can become. And then the second thing, like a follow-up to this, like the thing that probably we're losing momentum on is, do you both feel that traditional media, say radio, because radio is still very big, do you think radio is going to find a way to reintegrate podcasting, or like, what is it called? When someone buys into your thing and then they try and make it theirs. Like, do you think, yes, co-opt. Do you think radio or traditional media in a sense will start co-opting, like if a traditional media station tells you you still have the same freedom, but we have larger audiences and we can give you more money, like do you feel like that's a thing that's going to happen? Are they going to start targeting podcasters with that kind of reach to use you in a way for, again, information warfare? And this goes to both of you.
Yeah, I'll answer the first part. I think he's in better place to answer the second one. I see it as, again, it's a creator who, and I love the story even of how you guys began. It was not some big scheme. We're trying to become Lord of the Universe. It was just, it's some guys bantering. It's a girl showing her makeup routine. And then it goes and becomes this thing, all right? But somewhere along that journey, you're forced to make a choice. It's power that has been handed to you, and how you decide to utilize that power becomes really significant. And so even what we saw, again, I think last year really should be studied a lot more, because what we noticed that time was even the voices that, again, are not political, are neutral, or even just, you over there discussing lifestyle topics, everybody was dragged in. And I think that's what 2027 is going to look like to a large extent. There's no space to be neutral. Everybody will be dragged in, but you're not dragging everyone in equally. There's voices here that are significant. They have significant platforms. They can reach a lot of people. And for me, when I looked at these scenarios, I was just like, I had one very simple scenario. I was like, what happens if all the podcasters unite and they decide gonna caucus yao, and they're like, we're gonna back this one candidate, and they all decide that they're going to push this candidate, they're all going to platform these candidates, and they're not going to platform the other candidates. What impact does that have?
That's a really interesting question. Sorry, please finish.
And to your point earlier also of access, we see a lot more adoption of a need for information within these big moments. So even, that's why I was like, as long as people have access, they have the phones, they'll find money for that.
And they'll find a way.
They'll find a way. So the information is going to reach them again. So the battlefield for that information warfare it's here, and it's real, and it's going to happen on so many levels. And for us, I think the podcasters are going to be a significant chunk of that. The kind of attention these guys are garnering, to get people sitting down listening to you for 2 hours in this internet age of ours today is a miracle.
It is. And my final question actually is related to that. Mwafreeka, do you think that you could be a kingmaker in 2027?
I'm an atheist, so no. And I think that gets me out of the equation, because the fact that can be used against me, because you see, like right now, Ruto has gone back to the church, and he knows that Kenyans and religion, it's something we hold dear to our hearts. So as long as he can play that card, because you've seen, like lately, I think for the past 1 month, he's donated like how much to the church? Like yesterday, he was in Narok, donated 10 million. Yes? Yeah. So because of that, I still feel like podcasters haven't reached that level. Because even like for podcasters, it would be me, openly atheist. You have someone like Chaksi, who's, if there's a closeted atheist, so there are people like, with us, with that, the fact that we don't come with the church, because the church is a really powerful tool here. That's why when I see sometimes these preachers preaching against him, I'm happy, because I'm like, if they can convince our parents that it's not enough to just say that it's God who sent me to do this. So I don't think that what I think we can do, it's all of us, like the podcasters, like you said, if we can come out and make sure that people actually go out and get the voters card. Because that's another thing. A lot of people who even protested don't have voters cards. Many don't have IDs. And I feel like if people wait till 2027, because the government has NIS, so what they're going to do is they're going to make sure IDs are zitoki. So mtu yote yule anapata ID right now should be getting their ID right now. When the government still needs you to file taxes and what and what. But if we wait too soon. So I think that's the message, that yes, collectively as podcasters, we can. But to say that mimi specifically neza nini, naona hapo nitakuwa nimejihype mbaya sana, which I don't think is the situation. But yes, if you can get people to register as voters, because if the turnout in 2027 is the same as 2022, then I feel like Ruto is back.
There's nothing.
But if it's watu wakitransfer this anger, wapange nayo line, I don't think there's a way he can survive.
Allow me to just add, again, trends. All right? It's why it's going. I agree. Church, significant force. And I always like to think about the church as in a simple way. They have a platform. This is a place where people gather every week. And they give you attention for 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on your church.
Hey, which church is that?
Guy, wachana Catholics, 40 minutes.
No, sindio.
Tiona. Watu wanaishi kanisa.
Watu wanaenda wanakula.
Whole Sunday. But that's what makes it powerful.
Surely.
It's
Can
attention.
worship him outside of church. Anyway, please make your point.
Yes, it's attention. If you think of the church as a platform, it's for this period of time. Every week, this institution has access to millions of people. So I normally think of it as platform versus platform. That's what the news has. For this lot of time, millions of listeners. So I look at them at podcasters are the same thing. If you, for us amount of time, when you guys are brought together, I'm looking at 300 million plus views in a single year. And that's last year. All right. On a trend line that's moving this way. So and a lot of this phenomenon again is leaning young. So when I think about 10 years, 15 years, where does that shift?
Where does it go?
Where does it go? You know? Kids are not waking up to go to church. They're waking up to switch on a podcast. All right? And that's hypothetical. All right? And again, when that shifts, we might not affect it. I think there's still room to affect things significantly in 2027. But where it's going.
I like that because it's a great way to end that. I think too many people bookmark 2027 as the time where change either happens or we are doomed forever, right? But we've been in these moments before. There was 92 where people thought, now we have democracy. We're going to run this guy out of town. Moi was a minority candidate for 2 electoral cycles before he left, and the country still changed. So yes, trends are a really interesting way of looking at where perhaps podcasting is today and where it could go or grow to. There's lots more that we could talk about with you gentlemen, but I want to say thank you, first of all. Thanks a lot for the research that you guys put in, the hard work that you guys put in at OdipoDev. Nobert, thanks a lot for coming. And we will be inviting you when you have your next research, but also to talk about other things, because it's not just the research that you can speak to. And Mwafreeka, thank you, first of all, for coming on short notice, Easter Monday, and for giving us your thoughts and sharing with us, what you think about both the research and the space that podcasters have in the country. Justine, can you say goodbye to your people today?
Yeah. Shout out to the Pope, man. Like I'm not even Catholic, but my mom was, and one of my sisters is, and I think my older brother, and I think they're having an incredibly difficult time. So this is just to. I'm here for you guys. I can't do anything. I wish I could do like the resurrect, but take the time, mourn, but also celebrate, because I think he did really well for humanity. He stood with the most marginalized and oppressed people up to the very end, and I think that's what we should keep remembering. Even regardless of your access to power, it's the people, the everyday people that really matter, and if you hold the line for them, that's the most you can do.
All right, Justine, very nice. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on The Big Picture this week. We've had a great time here discussing both the state of affairs in land and land tenure with title deals. I'll remind you, the 27th of April was when episode 2 of Title Deal Season 2 is coming out. But in case you want to catch up with the one that ran last night, it's on our YouTube page. And then obviously this very important part of our discussion on podcasters and their power and their influence and what could be happening right now and what could happen in the next few years and few decades with regard to the space that people have in terms of the time for media and the influence that people have. Mwafreeka insists that he can't be a kingmaker. I see things rather differently, right? But thanks all the same for joining us on The Big Picture. It's been a great episode, great week. Apologies on the quality of the stream today. There's been really serious issues with electricity in our area, and that's affected the quality of the internet. But we will have these podcasts out on Spotify, on Apple, on your favorite podcasting platform tomorrow, as well as those cut downs that you can expect on TikTok. And next week, we've got what do we have? We haven't discussed what we're going to have next week.
You tell me. Me, I thought you were like, next week, or like, I thought you were doing like a whole thing.
No, like...
and then you started asking me, and
no,
I'm like...
to be honest, I had a brain freeze over there. But anyway, next week...
Tom is going to be back.
Oh, yes. Thomas is going to be back. And we're going to have a great guest for you, I'm sure. So tune in next week. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day or great evening, great afternoon, wherever you are. This has been A Big Picture. Cheers, guys. We'll see you next week.